Good. Hi, if I could add, we had a great session with Minerve, and one was kind of the call from Callum to really think about, that was Minerve's last question to us, was what action can we take this month? And to really start looking at different communities with which to engage. And instead of just farmers markets or I don't know what other fairs that we're used to really start looking at disabled hikers or community gardens that are serving, communities that we don't usually see. And to just really start to think about that. What are communities that we can reach out to that we don't usually?
I wanted to share something that we had in Wichita here recently. Was a meeting of many peoples from many different organizations that are all climate and ecology related. We had a nice get together and brainstormed on a lot of different possibilities of ways that we can assist each other. And it was very helpful to get, and we're going to try to continue that with regular, maybe get-togethers, but also emails and Zoom calls so that we can help a lot of people with their different issues. So things like planting more wildflowers, doing more trash pickups, doing going to city council meetings. So this is like a whole Wichita organization, and speaking with the people in the Wichita Council on more bike lanes, more safety for walkers, that kind of thing. In addition to trying to reach out legislatively. It's a little hard for them to understand, going on a federal level, but I think that it'll help a lot of people. So we have people from all different organizations, from Master Gardeners to Bike Walk Wichita to Sierra Club. So anyway, I think it's going to be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I know that there's so many different actions that we can take, and it all depends on also where you are, but that's all the time that we have to talk about this. We are going to have a little event later on if you want to stay on and talk more, but feel free to take a 5-minute break, knock your cameras, go stretch, get something to drink or eat. And we're going to come back at 1 for an En-ROADS presentation.
Okay, so I just started the recording. I'll start over. We're about to switch to our next session, and this is an En-ROADS presentation, as Allison mentioned. So our speakers are Susan Rassman, who you can see on the screen right now. That's great. And Susan is the leader of our Rolla chapter and has been since its inception. And she does such a great job of that chapter. And she's been using the En-ROADS Climate Solutions Simulator since 2019. Now, some of you may never have heard of this, I know, because some of you are brand new to CCL. And some of you have seen lots of presentations. Susan has done some wonderful things with this. She's actually trained as an ambassador of the En-ROADS program. And she also does a lot of volunteer work. So it's really wonderful, Susan, that you've done all the work that you've done to do this presentation, because trying to capture what's in the IRA, the biggest climate bill that ever got passed, and trying to do that in 30 minutes is an amazing thing. Plus, she's also going to talk about our policies, the CCL policies. So thank you so much for taking this on. And working with her is Tamara Szabo, who's an analytical chemist, and she's one of our Missouri State coordinators. And then she's also a liaison to one of our Missouri senators. So thank you both for taking this on, and I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Carol. So these are the goals we have today to show emissions reductions of the IRA and how CCL's 2023 policy agenda complements and supports provisions in the bill. We'll also give you some resources to help you involve your chapter and community, and the links will be shared with you at the end of today's program. We'll use En-ROADS, a global climate simulator that allows users to explore the impact of roughly 30 policies on hundreds of factors like energy prices, temperature, air quality, and sea level rise. Developed by Climate Interactive and MIT Sloan Sustainability Initiative, En-ROADS is a system dynamics model carefully grounded in the best available science and has been calibrated against a wide range of existing integrated assessment, climate, and energy models. And I'm going to take us to the model right now. So you can see these are the policies we can change down here at the bottom. And as soon as we do, we notice changes in the graphs and the temperature up top. Over on the left here, we have the global sources of primary energy, the 3 fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, renewables, bioenergy, and nuclear, from 2000 out to 2100. Burning of those 3 is what's leading, of course, to our rise in greenhouse gas emissions. The black line in the center here is the baseline. The blue line is the current scenario, which we're going to change. And of course, that's leading to our increase of 3.6 degrees Celsius or 6.4 degrees Fahrenheit. We can add the UN pledges or nationally determined contributions or Paris goals, whatever you want to call them. And for the US, that is an economy-wide target of reducing its net greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels in 2030. As I mentioned, this is a global model. It has been translated into 18 languages. I'm going to go ahead and put this on full screen. So the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, has 3 climate goals: reduce greenhouse gas emissions, create jobs, and address environmental justice. It required compromises, some of which we may not like, but overall, like the sign says, it's a big climate deal. We're going to explore why in the simulator, but first let's look at what some other models are saying. For the first goal, Princeton's repeat model shows the history of additions to energy capacity from 1950 through 2020, with projections based on IRA investments through 2035. So we see that hydro, coal, and gas dominated in the 1950s and 60s. Nuclear was added in the 70s and 80s. This is the fracking boom for gas in the early 2000s, and then the gradual increase in wind and solar up to today. And you can see the end of the graph is the expected added capacity in gigawatts. That's labeled on there. Most of it's solar, but there's onshore and offshore wind, some gas with carbon capture, coal with carbon capture, and a little bit of nuclear. Modeling by the Rhodium Group showed greenhouse gas reductions ranging from 31 to 44% by 2030, falling short of the Paris pledges. 2 other models had similar predictions. We'll also look at how CCL's new policy goals complement the Inflation Reduction Act and give us a roadmap for our work. And they are carbon pricing, healthy forests, building electrification and efficiency, and clean energy permitting reform. These are the talking points about carbon pricing, which many of you are familiar with. Be sure to check out the updates at cclusa.org under the category Our Climate Solutions. There's a page for each agenda item. Healthy forests have these benefits and more, as Peter Raven says in the quote at the bottom. And contrary to long-held misconceptions, trees never stop growing during their lifespans. In fact, as they age, their growth accelerates, even after they've reached massive sizes. This means that older trees play a substantial and disproportionate role in Earth's carbon cycle. Besides lobbying, you can work in your community alongside other environmental organizations. A great example is Forest Relief in St. Louis that promotes not just planting trees, but growing and planting species native to the region. This graph from the U.S. Energy Information Administration shows why building electrification and efficiency has so much potential for replacing fossil fuels in homes, especially for space heating and water heating, which is mostly natural gas. You can see that on the graph. So Rewiring America is the go-to source for information and tools to encourage electrification. You can educate your chapter and the community with presentations and resources like these, including a 4-page checklist to help make a plan to electrify. And don't overlook the significant resources from the U.S. Department of Energy and your own state's energy office that will write the rules and procedures on rebates. And remember, when it dies, electrify. Permitting reform is taking center stage right now as the critical piece in achieving the full potential of the IRA by 2030. The repeat model showed we need at least 2.5% per year transmission expansion just to meet 42% of the 2030 emissions reduction goal. But a lot of permitting reform is state and local, as many in our region know from experience. Kansas wind energy buyers in Indiana had to wait years for Missouri's legislature to finally approve the Grain Belt Express, even though communities around the state will benefit from tapping into those lines. These are just some of the ways CCL can do local advocacy. And now we'll go to the model. Sorry. I have to exit, and here we are. All right. So Tamara's going to read the provisions that we will model, and go ahead, Tamara.
Okay, CCL is advocating for clean energy permitting reform. So we are glad that in the bill, there's clean electricity production and investment tax credits for solar panels, small wind projects, residential and community solar, 30% credit for the first year of service with bonuses for brownfield siting, domestic materials, and low-income projects.
And we can model this under renewables, and we'll max that out because we saw from the graphs how much there's going to be or predicted to be. So you might have noticed some things changing in the graphs, and I will go ahead and run this so you can see what they are. And over on the left, you might have seen a ramp up in renewables, a slight decrease in gas and coal, which are the other, those fuels that are in the electricity generation mix. This right graph showed a drop in greenhouse gas emissions, and we had a 0.2 degrees C drop in temperature. One of the ways we can look at this is through the cost of electricity. So the marginal cost of electricity production for wind and solar has been coming down already. And the subsidies that we added with the IRA just make it go a little faster. But it had already surpassed gas in 2019 in price and coal in 2023. All right, next, Tamara.
All right, this one I think probably many of you have heard about, maybe even excited about. Tax credits for new and used EVs are in the bill. That has an income limitation and also maximum prices for vehicles, as well as a U.S. or free trade partner requirement for minerals and battery components.
So we'll model this under electrification of transport, and we're expecting high demand for EVs. So we'll take it to about here. And again, I will play this back and try to look at each graph individually. Okay, well, we saw another 0.1 degree Celsius drop in temperature and another drop in greenhouse gas emissions. And you may have noticed a ramp up in the green band for renewables. But what you could have also noticed is that what dropped over here is actually oil. But it doesn't happen right away. It takes a while out into the 2030s, and that's because of a dynamic called capital stock turnover. And you can think of capital stock as your car in your garage, if you happen to have a car in your garage, or a garage for that matter. But anyway, most Americans take 10 to 15 years to turn over their capital stock. That means trading in their car for a new EV might take a little while. All right, Tamara.
All right, the next one, CCL is advocating for building electrification and efficiency. And so it's great that in the bill, there is consumer home energy rebate programs, including rebates and tax incentives for heat pump, water and space heaters, other appliances, and home insulation. The high efficiency electric home rebate is for households below 150% of the area median income.
What I like about this is it also is for renters, not just homeowners. So we'll model that under energy efficiency in buildings and industry. We'll take that to about 80%. And we'll just rerun this. And you might have seen the temperature drop 0.3 degrees Celsius. Efficiency is a really powerful policy. Our greenhouse gas emissions came down, and it's a little hard to see over here, but all of the sources of energy dropped because we're using less of it. As my dad always said, the electricity you don't use is the least expensive. All right, next, Tamara.
All right, CCL is also advocating for healthy forests, and the Inflation Reduction Act has funding for climate smart conservation agriculture, including agroforestry, silvopasture, and cover cropping, and for the NRCS to conduct field-based data monitoring. There's funding to conserve old growth forests and for forestry programs like wildfire prevention.
Well, we've got a couple of places to look at this. And first is the agricultural provision. We're going to look at that under carbon removal and use the detailed settings to find agricultural soil carbon sequestration. We'll take that about halfway. And over here, we have another graph that popped up, sources of net CO2 removals. So this is the goldenrod agricultural soil carbon. And it is not taking much time to ramp up because those are practices that are already recommended by the USDA. And a lot of landowners participate in programs like EQIP and CSP that the USDA runs. The other two, we'll look a little bit at deforestation. We're going to reduce that about a third. And I forgot to run the first one, but let's run this one. So we go to have another 1/10 of a degree drop in the temperature and a slight decrease in greenhouse gas emissions from that. And then afforestation is planting trees. We've already talked about planting trees. And it's not going to show a lot of effect because, and I'll show you just a minute, there's a delay in the carbon dioxide removal of trees. And that's, as you can see here, it's taking out into the 2050s and 60s before the trees are large enough to sequester much carbon. By the way, this is the land that's needed for growing this CO2 removal biomass. And this dotted gray line is the area of India. So we have to pay attention, especially around the world, where are we going to be pushing out food production for smallholder farmers and that sort of thing. Even in our country, we have to watch that. Okay, next.
All right, CCL has long advocated for a price on carbon or a carbon tax or carbon fee, with the revenues raised from that to be redistributed to households in equal shares, and also a carbon border adjustment mechanism as part of that. That did not make its way into the IRA, but what did is a methane emissions reduction program, which is huge because it's the first ever federal fee on climate pollution. It's expected to make a big difference. And maybe open up the door to a price on carbon in the future. But as far as the methane is concerned in the IRA, it ranges from $900 per ton in 2024 and goes up to $1,500 per ton in 2026. And it's projected to raise $8 billion in revenue, boost the economy, and create jobs.
Okay, we can model this under methane and other gases. And that's right here. We'll take it down about a third. And I'm going to put up a different graph before I run this. So let's watch this. This is the greenhouse gas emissions by gas, so we can look at them individually, but we'll watch that here for a minute. And you can see that just that third that I moved the slider took us down 0.2 degrees Celsius, quite a jump. We can see here land use CO2, we've already affected that with the agricultural and forestry practices. So it was above the zero line, now it's going below. The dark gray is energy CO2, which we've also have had an effect just by the policies we've so far enacted or modeled, I should say. This is fluorinated gases, the goldenrod here, and those are refrigerants. Even though we were not able to just do the blue band of methane, we have done something about refrigerants in the US because the Senate voted to approve the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, which will phase out HFCs, one of those highly potent greenhouse gases. The purple is nitrous oxide or N2O. And this is actually produced by natural processes, but also by the use of chemical fertilizers. And the USDA practices, actually, a lot of that is fertilizer management. So only the right amount at the right time and never before a rain. So it won't run off into our streams and rivers, but also because microbial activity in the soil releases N2O. All right, next.
Okay, the IRA is big about community investment and environmental justice or energy justice. There's funding to the USDA for financial assistance to rural electric co-ops, including purchase of renewable energy systems or carbon capture and storage systems. There's funding for EVs for the Postal Service, a green tech accelerator, and grants for projects related to air pollution, extreme heat risk, resiliency and adaptation, and community engagement.
Okay, we don't have a slider down here to show this, but I can show you that one of the really important impacts, we have had some success in bringing it down, and that is air pollution from energy by source. And particulate matter 2.5 is what we're talking about here. It is the kind of pollution that causes childhood asthma, respiratory illness, heart attacks, and strokes. This was where we were. This is the baseline, and this is how much it's dropped. The biggest source of this is burning coal in coal-fired power plants. Also a bit of oil, that red line, and bioenergy. So now let's look at the mitigation done by the measures from the IRA we built into this scenario. Greenhouse gases have come down and temperature a bit, not nearly enough, but there's one big factor that is keeping us from reaching our 2030 UN goal right here. And that is the significant delay because there's no direct reduction in fossil fuels, and power plants have a 30+ year lifetime. There is one policy that can make a difference, And it's at the top of CCL's policy agenda, carbon pricing. We can model it right here under carbon pricing, and let's give it a pretty hefty carbon price. All right, let's replay and see if you can see what happened. Immediately, I saw 0.5 degrees, a whole half a degree Celsius come off of that temperature in 2100, the temperature increase. I also saw the greenhouse gas emissions reach that goal, the 2030 goal. And let's look again and try to figure out when this occurs on the graph on the left. So these are the 3 fossil fuels, and they started dropping immediately as soon as that policy got passed. It also ramped up renewables. They're no longer competing as much in the electricity generation space. And that is why the fossil fuel companies fought so hard against this policy. And in the realm of predictable consequences, cost of energy spiked. That's not because you're paying the fee, it's because the fossil fuel companies passed it on through to you. But we know that there's another part to this, and that is also revenue. And if the revenue is returned to the people in the form of a cash back or a dividend, they will be made whole and be able to weather that transition. And that's what CCL recommends in our policy. And that's all we have time for right now. So I'll stop sharing and I guess turn it over to Carol.
Well,
Or-
Susan, this is great. So you actually are done 5 minutes early, and our next speaker is not here yet. So if you wanted to go back and show other slides or more of your presentation, or if you want to just take questions, what's your choice? What do you want to do?
I'd be glad to take questions if there are any.
Okay, if people could throw them in the chat, and Allison, if you could help look at the chat while I try to track down Madeline.
Madeline's here.
What?
Carol.
I'm here.
Madeline is here. I let her
How did you
in.
get in? Did Allison let you in and I didn't know it? Oh my goodness, and I'm emailing you and kind of going crazy. Or somebody let you in. We have several co-hosts. I'm so glad they're here. You're here. Wonderful. Well, that's my second time for being frantic today. I guess I could get a couple more, couldn't I? I'm so glad you're here, Madeline. Yay. Perfect. So best news I've gotten all day. So Madeline is one of my very favorite people in CCL. I think I've said that before when I've introduced you. And we have some people on this conference today, Madeline, who are at their very first CCL event. Isn't that wonderful? Register for CCL, register for the conference, and now you're invited to everything. We'll reach out to you. So we have people from 4 states, at least one person from every state, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. And we had a wonderful presentation from Susan and Tamara just now on En-ROADS. Did you see much of it?
Just like the last 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
And Carol,
recording it.
while we
Yeah.
still have Susan, Carol, while we
Yes.
still have Susan, there's a really good question in the chat from
Oh, okay.
Steve Melton about
Okay.
En-ROADS.
Okay. Shall we take one quick question, Madeline, before you start?
Sure.
Okay. So, Steve, do you want to ask it?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, but En-ROADS, if you think of those graphs, it models at a global policy level, not country specific. So, if we do all these good things in the United States, which I hope we do, it isn't going to move the needle on global temperatures that much. And that's what some of the people who are against climate action say, is, we can spend trillions of dollars reducing emissions in the United States, but if China and India and others continue to increase their coal burning for electricity, it isn't going to move global temperatures much at all. So, one of the great things about carbon pricing, is that it forces everybody around the globe to act as well. And, we should do everything we can in the United States to reduce emissions, but we can't lose sight that we need a global fix to this. We can't fix it within the United States' borders.
Okay, I'll just let you
That's-
know that this is a small part of a much longer presentation that I give. And I
Right.
do show economies of scale and feedback loops. And also a feedback loop that we can imagine is that we actually have momentum now. We have the first ever climate bill. If the rest of the world sees the biggest polluter historically, the US, responsible for 25% of the emissions that are already there in the atmosphere, is finally doing something that may motivate others. Also, it's not true that we're the only country that is talking about carbon pricing. There are many countries around the world that already have carbon pricing of one form or another. So I don't know. There is no big answer to that, but let me tell you what the purpose of the model is. The model is to show relatively the impact of various policies. Especially, it's designed to show policymakers themselves what the policies they might be thinking about can do. For instance, the Trillion Trees initiative, planting trees. It doesn't have an immediate impact. So it really doesn't do much for the ultimate amount of carbon and other pollutants that are in the atmosphere. What we have to do, and we know that from being in CCL, is act quickly. Because we're running out of time, frankly. Does that answer it, Steve? You have any-
I agree with everything you said 100%. It just, when you're using this En-ROADS, when you look at the effects of different policies, it would be as if this policy were adopted worldwide. This
Exactly.
would be the effect.
That's
Yeah,
true.
We
That is
can't
true.
leave the audience with the impression that if we do this in the United States, we can have, these outsized impacts on the global climate. Everybody around the world is going to have to do this,
And some of that is already built into the model, by the way.
Yeah.
There are limits to how much you can do with each of these sliders. I also didn't move the sliders as much for things like, for instance, deforestation, because we've got forest fires happening in this country even.
Yeah. Right.
So that's deforestation.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's, again, that's the purpose of the model, is to show you relatively what these would do.
Right.
Climate.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Really good question, Steve. And I remember when Susan, you and I were both on that webinar that Drew, who created the model, I've forgotten his last name, sorry.
Jones.
Drew Jones, yeah. He was a speaker at CCL at one point too. So I remember he did a training very soon after the IRA passed. And he shared a lot of the things about how he put it in there so that it would show the US impact. And even though we know that we have to work on the rest of the world. So thank you so much, Susan. All the work you and Tamara put into putting this on. And I know there's just so much in the IRA that's overwhelming. And we will give people lots of resources where you can do more research, and we're going to give everybody the link to the Rewiring America calculator and everything, so that you'll be able to learn more about it for yourselves. Thank
And
you.
I have to apologize because I have a chapter meeting and I am group leader and I have to set up all the technology. We're hosting Renew Missouri, a nonprofit, and we have invited the entire area of our our co-op, our electric co-op. So I'm sorry, Madeline, I'm gonna miss you.
That's a fantastic reason to miss
It's a
me.
good
You go
one.
right
All right.
on, Susan. Go do it.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm
See you later.
recording it, Susan. You can hear it later.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks
Bye.
so much.
Susan,
Yes.
it's Jill. Are you leaving right away? Should I
Yes, I
head
am.
out soon?
Yeah, I'm going to head out as soon as I get packed up. I've
Okay,
got to
I'll see
bring
you
my
over there in about
computer
half
down.
an hour.
But Jill, your thing starts in 3.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Glad you were here, Jill. Yeah. Okay. Yes, so we're gonna lose 3 people for that wonderful event. Okay, so Madeline, say something.
Hi, Carol.
Okay,
Thank you for
there you
having me.
are. There you are. So I don't want to take any of your time and I want to let you go. We're going to do breakout sessions after this, so if people have questions, and then we'll have another time at the end too, where afterwards, if people want to stay and ask other questions, because we've covered a lot of material already today. So Madeline, I love the fact that you decided to do these sessions. So it was last year that you took on going to every region in the country and just letting people ask questions. And I'm sure that you have something you want to say before you get to that, but I want to prep it so that people are thinking, what are the questions you want to ask our executive director? And she's doing such a fabulous job as executive director. It's so fun to watch how you're empowering the staff. And when Madeline had to go out of town unexpectedly, people just jumped in and took over. It's amazing. So when she got back, she said, hey, go ahead, you keep doing that for a little while, which was great. Yeah. So thank you so much. And Allison and I will watch, but if you have some questions, we might would you rather do it with electronic hands and just let people ask any question, or do you want us to monitor questions?
However you want to do it, Carol.
Okay, why don't you put your questions in the chat in case there are way too many of them? How about that? And we can start doing electronic hands too once you're.
Yeah, I'm always happy to have people ask me, just because I crave face-to-face interaction, and it's slightly closer that way than reading it out of the chat.
It is really great. Okay, so do you want to say some things before we start with questions?
I was assuming you wanted me to, and I have a few things, but we can also just do questions. I'll go ahead a little bit.
Yeah,
How about that?
go ahead.
And there'll still be
Sure.
plenty of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I did want to say, well, first of all, I had this momentary gleeful thought frivolously as I watched Susan do the slider bar on a carbon price that oh, I wish it was that easy. We could just move the slider bar and have the carbon price and there it would be. Wouldn't that be nice? But it isn't like that because people are complicated and endlessly interesting. So I wanted to start just by saying I have totally loved these connections with the regions. It was so great the last time I did it that I decided to do it again. And so thank you for giving me a little chance to dip into your conference. And I always appreciate conference organizers because that's hard work. And you have those moments Carol was talking about of panic here and there, and it's just part of the process. And I want to thank you for deciding that, on Sunday afternoon that doing something about the climate's a priority for you. So thanks for being here. And I have to wax nostalgic because I remember the first Tornadoes Regional Conference that I went to. We were in this big old house. And while we were meeting in the dining room, you could smell these wonderful smells coming from the kitchen because volunteers were cooking up all our meals really, but dinner while listening in on the topics. And it was just so up close and personal. Zoom's like a blessing. Where would we be without Zoom through this period of time? But I don't think I'm ever going to remember a Zoom meeting the way I remember being together in that house. So it's 2023 now, and we're making it work. I do wish I could have been here for your whole conference. The inclusion work that comes out of this region has always been exemplary and an inspiration to the rest of the country. And En-ROADS has just always been enlightening and such a useful tool. But I do like that I get to Zoom in without having to travel, and then I can hear from you. I just want to say a little about focus because we broadened our policy agenda and we're used to being a very tightly focused organization. And that was essential and appropriate, you know, like, you know, most of us, so there's a few people who can successfully multitask, but I'm sure not one of them, and many of us aren't. And most of us can just put our attention on a few things. And in order to stay effective and strategic, we have broadened our agenda, but that doesn't mean it's now spread out to everything. But it's a little uncomfortable going from tightly focused to a little more focused. And then if you're like, what does it mean? Where are the bounds? And we'll get through this period and learn about that. But I just want to reiterate that we've broadened our policy agenda, but focus continues to be important. There's a lot of things to be done, as we've already, as I've already heard, and urgently. And that's why I've always been grateful that there's an ecosystem of climate groups, so that Citizens Climate Lobby or any one organization doesn't have to try to do all of the many things that need to be done. So one way I remember how to stay focused is that our place in the ecosystem is kind of defined by our core values. Things like being bipartisan and being grounded in respect and gratitude as we work with people, by working for things rather than against things, by being united as a national team on a common agenda. Like those are our ways of being, and that all remains the same. And I'll also say another thing that remains the same is that we welcome people, and I'm especially saying this to the folks who are new today, because it can feel like a lot when you first jump in. It can feel like such a huge amount. We offer a ton of training, and completely welcome people at whatever level of time and attention you have for this. You know, some of us, like me, my whole life got taken over by it. And I love that, you know, and that's fine. That works for some people. For others, it's a more medium level. And for others, it's like there's like one or two things you can do. And we want to pave the way for people at whatever level of commitment they have. So you're welcome with whatever you can bring to this. So I don't really think I'm going to say much more. What I want to say is that one way to think about your chapter focus and activities is looking for the sweet spot, and I think Susan just modeled it, of finding what's locally relevant combined with what enhances our national goals. So she's brought in Renew, a statewide group to work with on electrification, honed in on one of those. Presumably her chapter isn't trying to do every single thing to the nth degree. Maybe some super large chapters are going to get there. I doubt it. Everybody's going to have to pick and choose. So there's a sweet spot of what's locally relevant combined with our national goals and with what will reach your members of Congress. Because our local things are meant to build towards that national action also. Like when you, especially in the tornadoes region, I'm going to say extra there, when you get things happening locally and your members of Congress know about it, it builds more space for them to be stronger federally on climate. So keep connecting tree planting and parks cleanup to getting people to write Congress on the Trees Act or the Save Our Sequoias Act, and connecting renewable energy tax credits to supporting the bill, the Inflation Reduction Act that made them possible, and keep drawing those connections between your local stuff and the federal stuff, and we'll keep helping you do that. And I'm just going to stop there, maybe say a little at the very end and see what questions you got or what you want to tell me too.
Okay, so why don't we use the electronic hands? If people have some questions, you click on reactions and then raise hand, just like I just did. See that? And that will have you pop up right in the front where we can see you. And Madeline, I had the thought that a friend of mine, while we're waiting for some questions, I had the thought that a friend of mine just told me that she went to the opera the other night, and there was our member of Congress, and she spoke. So you never know when you're going to run into them. I've met her twice so far, not in lobby meetings, not yet. She's really in demand, but I've met her at Earth Day where she spoke, and then I met her at a St. Louis area neighborhood or community organization conference that she spoke at. And each time she took a few minutes to listen. It wasn't long, but she always had someone with her who handed me their card. And that's made a difference. So yeah, it's wonderful for us to get versed in our policies. So
That's why we practice and role play, isn't it?
yes, yes, it is.
That
So
reminds
it's-
me of during budget reconciliation, when Senator Manchin was such a central figure. He was in Texas in a boot store, and one of our volunteers was in the same boot store and went up and spoke to him and actually got a card out of him to connect him to his legislative director. And he was ready with a faith approach, because that does seem to work more than some things with Senator Manchin. So yay, volunteers, take advantage of those.
And our member of Congress is the only super, super, super progressive one in our whole region. There are some states where there haven't been any changes in who the members of Congress are for 10 years. And what's interesting is now they're rising up to the leadership roles, those members of Congress. So
Yeah.
our patients, I see two state coordinators with their hands up, Jean Larson and Jan Shaper, and they're the co-coordinators in Arkansas. And it's Arkansas where some of their members of Congress are now in leadership positions. So let's hear what they have to say. Jean, you want to go first?
Great, thanks. Thank you, Madeline, for being here. It's
You
fabulous
bet.
to see you.
Hi,
And
Jean.
I love what's happening with the national team. You're so supportive and it seems very energized. And so my first question kind of led to a second question. One was how does that, the change in focus, how is the national team dealing with it? Are they going through, some growing pains, or was it embraced immediately? And that kind of brought up the question that I love the government affairs team is so strong. And was this really the increasing our focus to 4 policies? Was this a big recommendation from them?
Great questions. Yeah, staff are just people, just like volunteers are just people, just like members of Congress are just people. And when you deal with change, like I think it was my first staff meeting as executive director, I just said right up front, I know I'm the architect of change here, and very privileged and pleased to step into this role. And at the same time, I will confess to you that I don't really like change more than anybody else. Change is necessary, change is good, change is growthful, and it's uncomfortable. And that varies from person to person. I think the staff is, as you've observed, is doing fine and supportive, and it's also been a lot of work. We have to do a lot of learning and a lot of figuring out how much can we provide in terms of resource and how much can we, and thankfully we are saved by the fact that we've always relied on the expertise of folks out in our states and communities, like what I just saw with the En-ROADS presentation, to bring a lot of that knowledge to people too. So it isn't all on staff, thank God. I would say our government affairs people are ecstatic, except that, that's not their personal style to emote that way. That's not what you do on the Hill. But they look so happy to me. They are so aware that the way that our grassroots interacts in the communities and the goodwill that engenders on the Hill, and that the way that when we come in on legislation, our folks in the communities go out and get co-sponsors and get positive press. They're so aware of that, and members on the Hill are too. So what this broadened agenda has given them is more ways to interact. They are still interacting on finding support for a carbon fee and dividend type bill with Republicans and Democrats. They're still interacting with the people who are going to put forward the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act again. And they're also pulled into meetings on permitting reform now, and on forests, and CBAMs. Like, they're right in those conversations also. And that place where they can be a little bit more in the back rooms and then bring that out to us to then knowledgeably and strategically work at the local level. I'm loving the synergy, and they are too. So they're happy campers, I'd say. Other than they do have too much work to do, but we're all like passionately trying to get to the same place with some feeling of urgency. So I don't mind hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How about you, Jan?
Hi, everybody. Madeline, thanks for being here. And I just want to start out with an appreciation. I've noticed on some calls, I think it might have been one of the Saturday calls and maybe on a group leader call, that you're taking time to emphasize the work that's being done by small chapters. And I think probably pretty much everybody on this call knows that the tornadoes region is a tough region to keep going and dealing with our members of Congress. And so I know here in Arkansas, a lot of our chapters are very, very small, or people are, kind of working geographically isolated. Give a shout out to my friend Clay McCaskill here for holding ground at his college. So thank you for that. And then my question is, I think it was mentioned on either a group leader or state coordinator call that you recently went to 2 conferences. One was the big, I guess, energy and oil conference, and the other was a diversity, equity, inclusion. That might not be the right phrasing, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience at those.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. And just that I appreciate the appreciation, and it came out of it, again, my utter commitment to continuing to listen to people from across the country and multiple perspectives, which also is why I would be both at an energy industry conference and an environmental justice retreat, is to keep, because I think it's an oppressive allegory from my childhood, the blind men and the elephant, most likely, but it's like when you've got this big thing, nobody has the whole picture. And so I make better decisions and realize what the gaps are when I keep talking to people. And I started to realize that in our actions and our guidance to chapters, we were leaning towards like talking as if everybody was a big chapter with 6 communities. And so, and that's not what we've been historically. It's not actually what we are now. And small groups of people get a lot done. Yeah, so, okay. So the energy conference was called Sarah Week. I honestly had never heard of it before I got invited to speak on a panel. And the name of the panel was fascinating to me. It was Radical Collaboration for Pragmatic Energy Solutions. And it came about from some like roundtables I'd been in, where I was able to build relationships with people in different organizations that are focused on civil engagement and climate, both. So a real sweet spot for somebody from CCL. And the conference itself was fascinating. It was weird, like you sit down at a banquet table in the giant ballroom of the plenary, and you're like, "Hi, I'm Madeline," and they're like, "Hi, I'm Fred." And what brings you here, Fred? "Well, I run Shell's operations in Africa." And I'm like, "Holy cow," or I'm the sustainability director for an energy company, but in truth, I mean, historically, this conference has been very much about the fossil fuel industry and its promotion, and it's evolved in fits and starts, and not equally in every place. It's evolved towards a recognition that there is an energy transition. They were not debating that. There is an energy transition. How fast should it go? What does that mean? And there were a lot of smaller innovative companies. I heard a lot of talk about how to repurpose fossil fuel assets. Like Texas has geothermal opportunities where they could use old wells oil wells to access the geothermal heat. And I'm like, well, this is fascinating. Pour some energy and resources into that, please, people. So that's on one end, and the panel was fun because everybody on the panel I supported a carbon price. It was designed to showcase that. The ExxonMobil guy did, what that lobby meeting aside, the moderator of the panel did, and the policy person on it was the guy who's basically designed the current carbon border adjustment mechanism legislation. And for me, it was a confidence builder because I held my own there with those guys. And I laughed a lot because it was Robbie, Bobby, and Dave. So I couldn't get too worked up when I felt like I was sort of back with I used to teach 4-year-olds. Anyway, it went well, and you could really highlight that there are different ways to strategically move forward a carbon price. And we occupy one very important place, but we aren't alone in that. So that was that. So the environmental justice retreat, I have to talk about carefully because it's under what they call Chatham House rules, where in order to create a safe space where people can talk honestly and build relationships and trust, you don't say who's in there. And so I can't say much about it. It's actually building off something that had been going on for 3 years between climate, kind of traditional climate groups and CCL and environmental justice groups to build relationships. And now it's a subset of people who have taken on a mission of seeing together, can we design an equitable and just carbon price? And they don't assume they're going to have an answer to this in the next 3 months, like this is like a 2 or 3 year process. But it gives me a chance to, again, listen to and understand at greater depth what the needs are and the perspectives are, and see if we can make progress in this really important area. And so it meets sometimes on Zoom and then periodically has retreats.
Thank you so much.
I really love working for an organization that puts me in such different spaces and tries to put it all together in one place. It's a stretch every day, and I love it.
And it's so wonderful to hear the work you're doing, Madeline.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I got to say one more thing on that. Over and over, I run into people who have met you all and been impressed. Even if they don't agree with us, they're impressed by how we do things. And it just, if nothing else, it sure makes me feel good, but it also really makes us effective.
Yeah, so wonderful. And there's another hand raised by another state coordinator. We didn't tell people that it only state coordinators could ask questions, but this is Tony Schmidt, who's the state coordinator in Kansas. Tony. And we just have a few more minutes left.
Sure thing. Well, hello, everybody. And thank you for this great regional conference, Carol. I just had a couple questions, Madeline. I just heard yesterday about there possibly being a piece of legislation in the works on permitting reform. I was hoping maybe you could tell us a little about that, if you maybe know anything. Secondly, I also was reading in Brett's latest release about when we're interacting with some of our state legislators, that we are to be very careful about the impression we leave because of the relationships we have in Washington, and how, like in red states, it's maybe not a good idea to get involved in issues that do not have some Democrats involved in the issue. What it was suggesting is that it needs to be a bipartisan issue for us to get involved as CCL. And is that something that has been decided at the national level and that we need to be careful about?
Let me take that one first, and then remind me about permitting reform, because I can't hold more than one thing in my head at a time if I ever could. Okay, so I think something got misheard or miscommunicated there, Tony.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, the general principle that applies whether you're in a red, blue, or purple state is to think about the work you do in your state, or really in your community, and how it will resonate upward with your congressional delegation that you know in your state that you're working with, and nationally. For example, in a blue state, it could be very easy to get deeply involved in very blue things. And that will play well locally and play well with the Democrats there. If that achieves, like, if that starts to give us a national reputation as supporting not, very blue things, then we run into problems getting support from Republicans, like your Republicans, if they knew that, which isn't happening, that, somewhere we were all over a natural gas ban. Well, that's like a, one of those lightning rod issues on the right now, when, it's an attack point. So we're better off, even in a blue state where it could be politically popular, staying out of natural gas bans. Now, your situation where you have red states, actually, it's fine, like in Utah, to work on things that are Republican only. What you wouldn't want to do in a red state is work on things that come forward from the handful of, of Democrats, and this is an interesting thing for Carol with the one progressive legislator in Missouri, so she, they could go all in on whatever that legislator wants, or or the 6 legislators who are progressive in your state legislature and alienate all the Republicans. And that's what you don't want to do, even though it plays locally very well in the community. That's where you got to think local and national. But in Republican areas, it's actually strategic to work just on Republican things, because Republicans are the harder lift on climate. They have the bigger barrier to jump over. And the poster child for that is Utah, where they've done a state climate action resolution and some other, and they got Democrats on it. But even if they only had Republicans on it, the fact that Utah passed a climate resolution sends a message to their Republican legislators that, hey, we can do more on climate. And that's why I think we have Curtis as such a strong leader there. In a purple state, it really makes no sense to do anything that's not bipartisan. And that's lovely for us anyway. In general, bipartisan is best. But I think I wouldn't say that you can't do Republican only things. Like if you can get Republicans to move on climate, go for it. Take them where they are and applaud what they'll do, and then ask a little more the next time.
Great, thank you for that, Madeline. Those guidelines are so brand new that we haven't even had a chance to talk about them yet. And Tony, you might have some conversation in your state breakout session today about those things. So
any news on the permitting reform?
Yeah. Oh, and go read the guidelines like 4 or 5 times. Like that's my recommendation. Like there's a lot in there. So permitting, there's actually going to be a permitting bill from the right that comes out and a permitting bill from the left that comes out, most likely. And then the question is, how do you put them together? There is interest on both sides of the aisle in it. I think it's a unique time actually, because on both the right and the left, there are also voices that oppose many projects and want to be able to use the current system to slow projects down. And that is understandable in times and places. And yet there's this growing understanding among many people that we have to have a faster system if we're going to install the things we need to install to build the clean energy projects that we need to build. And so what we are positioned to do well as a bipartisan focused climate group that is willing to wade into these waters is to push for good compromise legislation. between what's going to come out from the right and the left. So the first stuff coming out from the right may not look that good, but more is coming out from the left that will look better if you are from the left. And then the sausage making starts. And our team is connecting to people on both sides of the aisle on permitting reform. We will be lobbying and I mean, first we'll be studying carefully what's in there. But our hope and prayer, and we're not an organization that takes on easy things, is that legislation can be crafted that preserves public input, preserves environmental safeguards that are needed, and still speeds up the process so that it doesn't take 5 to 10 years to, build out the clean energy projects that are waiting, that have merit. Take advantage as much as you can follow our trainings and guidance and news on this as it comes out. We will do our best to keep you informed, and we'll do our best to get the best possible legislation. And there's appetite in Congress. It may be that the political complications aren't something that they get over in this Congress. But we know that like 80% of the emissions reductions from the Inflation Reduction Act are going to get hung up if we don't improve this process.
Yeah, well said, Madeline.
Okay,
And
I went over.
you went over. We're being patient. We really, really, really so appreciate it. It's just, I think that you've just put such a good perspective on things for people. It's very helpful for us to talk about our red states and purple states here. It gets old sometimes, so it's really great to have that national perspective. So thank you. You know what's next on our agenda is I'm going to do a fundraising announcement.
Wow, good.
Unless
we
you want to.
I'm going to listen and enjoy. And
okay.
Our staff exists to serve you all and is precious. So.
Okay, and Allison,
Go,
if you
Carol.
take the slide down, because first you let me say a couple things, remember? Okay, Allison and I are doing tech together, and man, it's challenging. So thank you so much. And after that, people are going to go into state breakouts, and I have that all set up. How about that? And we've got plenty of time for it. So thank you so much. It really has been wonderful.
You're welcome.
And so Allison, what you need to do, remember, is to drop when I get ready for you to do it, you need to drop the link in the chat first and then do the slide, because it doesn't work the other way around. That's what she discovered. When she's sharing her slides, she can't put something in the chat. So really, it's so perfect to say this right in this setting, like when we're, I'm going to pin myself so people can see that I'm speaking. So when we're just at the end of so much, we started today with a whole panel of people talking about diversity and inclusion and engagement, and it was just wonderful. And Karina even came up for a little while. That was fun. She snuck in and went in one of the breakout rooms with them. And then Susan did that wonderful En-ROADS presentation. So we're all up to here with details, but we're going to give people lots of information that you can use, references. And the thing that I'm present to is that wouldn't have happened without you. Now, yeah, some of you are brand new, but you care about this. You're here, right? And those of you who have been here for as long as I have, over 13 years, and there are people everywhere along that spectrum. The actions you've been taking all these years has caused that. The biggest climate bill ever passed. You caused that. Thank you. I'm moved by that. And what I want to invite you to do is in addition to all the other things you do, to contribute to CCL monetarily. So Allison, if you could drop the link in the chat, and then put up the slide. That would be great. And what we're doing, I love the fact that Citizens Climate Lobby does 2 different campaigns for fundraising every year. Do you know that over half of our funding, I think that I even heard it was 75%, comes from our volunteers. Isn't that amazing? I just love that. And we do 2 campaigns a year, one at year end for individual donations. And at this time of year, we're right in the middle of our monthly donation campaign. This one I find really easy to participate in. You can put in an amount to contribute every month that you won't even feel when it goes. And then over time, you can build it. And what I love about this is Allison took what's on our website and she made some QR codes so you could scan them. And for the old school, you can go to did you put it in the chat yet? The link to yeah, there it is. The link to get to the donate page directly. And what I found was this is for monthly donations. So when I went to increase mine just recently, you click on you'll see a website page that looks a lot like this. You click on the donate now button. I'm sure you can figure that out. And it pops up a little screen that's very easy to fill out. And you either say how much you want to start donating, going like as if you have not done it before, just put in how much you want to donate every month. If you already donate every month and you want to increase it, just put in the increase amount. That wasn't totally obvious to me, so that's why I'm telling you. The younger people on here would be able to figure that one out real easily, right? I'm not one of those younger people, young at heart. So I invite you to donate. It's a wonderful gift. And some people do this more than other things. And there are so many people who have totally different ways of participating. We love whatever you do. So thank you for whatever you can do. Does anybody have a question about this? No? Okay. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to go ahead and do that. We'll leave this slide up. And here comes Jill back again. So if somebody could tell her what she missed, that would be great. Jill, I just saw you join us again. So ask in your breakout room what we just did. And somebody will give you the link if you want it. That's wonderful. So let's see. So sorry. Okay. So what we're now going to do is, and this campaign, you know what? So here it is. I didn't even say it. My husband just pointed to me. Finish, Carol. He heard this before. So our campaign is that if we raise $10,000 by the end of this month, an anonymous angel investor or donor, a volunteer will donate, will match that with $100,000 gift. Isn't that amazing? What a wonderful thing. And I just checked a few minutes ago, we're up to 49.20 right now. So by all means, go in and donate if you can, increase your donation if you can. It's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Yes. So I'm going to leave it up for while you can go and do that. And in a few minutes, we'll put you in your breakout rooms by state. And we're putting 2 states in each breakout room. It's very simple. I've got everybody assigned, except I'll make sure Jill is assigned to one. And if you have more questions, you might get a chance to ask those questions in your breakout room. And if not, where you're going to be whisked back into this room right before 3 o'clock, about 10 of, and then we'll stay afterwards if anybody wants to stay for more questions. And we'll probably create some breakout rooms so people can do different things, so you can hang out, get questions answered, whatever suits you. So thank you very much. And Allison, you had one other thing you were going to do. Was it?
Yeah, I'll just talk about it briefly because we are a bit over time.
Yes.
But completely okay. These are just the resources that we discussed today. There is a QR code that you can scan for your phone, and each one of them will link And there's also a URL that I will send in the chat right after, but please take a look because as we said, we did cover so much and we don't have the time to go in depth. So please just try to educate yourself as much as you can. And yeah, I'll leave it over to you to get us into breakout rooms.
Okay, all right, great. And I hope